I call the Maplewood City Council Budget Work Session to order on Tuesday, May 2nd. Mr. Reese, would you please do roll call?
Councilmember Correll.
Here.
Councilmember Buckingham. Councilmember Garcia. Councilmember Homa.
Here.
Mayor Knapper.
Here.
Councilmember Maddox.
Here.
Councilmember Page.
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. May I have a motion to excuse Councilmember Buckingham?
Motion to excuse Councilmember Buckingham. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. For the record, I know Councilmember Garcia is coming, but since she's not here, I'm going to ask for a motion to excuse Councilmember Garcia. May I have a motion?
Motion to excuse Councilmember Garcia. Seconded.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you. All right, Mr. Reese, item number 4.
Sure, we're going to cover revenue projections with item number 4. I'm going to turn over to Lexi Miller for that topic.
Okay. So I'm gonna try to make this so that it's at least somewhat legible for you guys. It's gonna be hard though, because to get all of it on one page is just gonna be difficult. So we're gonna do it this way. Okay. So again, we have just with all of our other budgets, these are our revenue projections for the current fiscal year as well as for next fiscal year. So we have, I'm sorry, I don't know where I'm at. So we have actual for 2020, 2021, actual revenues for 21, 2022. And then we have what we budgeted for 2022, 2023, our forecast where we think we're going to end up at 2020 at the end of this year, June 30. And then what we expect to have for the budget for 2023, 2024. We are estimating a modest growth in real property tax this next fiscal year. It is a reassessment year, so we do think that there is a possibility for some growth, but we don't anticipate a lot of growth. Mostly because even though some assessments may go up, people do have the opportunity to appeal those and to the Board of Equalization. And when there is a big growth just because of inflation, usually the Board of Equalization will even that out because they don't want big fluctuations year to year. So we are just budgeting a moderate growth from what we actually are receiving this year to what we're anticipating receiving next fiscal year. For our sales tax, we have both a local and a local use tax and a sales tax, which are just for our general funds. Both of those, again, we are still anticipating a modest growth. Again, we have very high inflation, and so the cost of goods are more expensive, which means that if the total cost is more expensive, the tax is more expensive as well. So the tax revenue is higher. We don't want to, that's not really our goal, is to have really high inflation and then have higher tax revenues because of that. We'd rather have businesses really selling a lot of product and have higher tax revenues, not just because the cost of goods has just gone up. So, but we are budgeting an increase of about $600,000 in total tax revenues for next fiscal year. We also have to gauge all of our revenues for next year based on a possibility of an economic slowdown, because I don't know if anybody is aware, but the Fed keeps on adding interest rate to try to slow down expenditures to try to curb inflation. And if they go too far, we'll hit a recession, and we don't want to do that. And I don't anticipate that, but I also think that spending will cut back some. So that's why we're not going to continue super high growth like we would like to see, but I don't see that happening. Okay, so then the next grouping is our gross receipts taxes. And these are the taxes that are on your electric, your gas, your phone, your water bill, your sewer bill. Well, I guess not your sewer bill, but your electric, gas, your phone and water. We see a modest increase in all of these. Except for phone, we see a decrease. Most people do not have a landline, and until the courts have figured out about all of the cell phone lines and all of that, we don't see that number continuing to go up. We see it actually going down. So that's why we are showing that as a decrease for next fiscal year. But overall, for the category, it is a very slight increase of about $26,000. So it is very slight, but and that is why. The next section is licenses and permits. And as you remember, during the Public Works session, when Public Works Director Traxler was here, he had talked about increasing some of our fees in a modest way. And we did so we did incorporate that in our budget for some of our licenses and permits and service fees. And we also did where we took back the carve out that we had for the automotive dealers on the business license fees. So the automotive dealers had a carve out where they only paid up to a certain amount. Now they're going to pay business license fees on their total gross receipts, just like all the other businesses in the city. And so that is why there is that increase in licenses and permits. And it's a significant increase, and most of that is due to the car dealerships because they were not paying on their full receipts. The next one is what's called intergovernmental receipts. These are like your cigarette tax, your gasoline tax, motor vehicle tax and fees, things like that. We do also have in here like our school resource officer, some of our law enforcement grants that we get. We don't budget for a lot of law enforcement grants. We get small ones from the State Highway Patrol for overtime for traffic enforcement. And so we do get some small ones for that for overtime that we do from time to time. So that's where we budget those funds as an overall item. You will see that there's $28,600 budgeted as a FEMA grant. Those are grants that are for the fire department. One is for the cardiac monitor that they had mentioned in their budget that they had a grant for, and it was a 50% match. The other one is for the fire helmets that they had, and it was like a $9,000 that they were getting to pay for the fire helmets. So that's where that grant money is as well. The next one is fees for service. These are some more of those fee increases that we have. The biggest one is going to be your zoning and subdivision fees. That varies from year to year. It just depends on what comes before, before zoning for zoning and subdivision. Comes before zoning, excuse me. We usually budget, last year we budgeted 4,000, we only had 2,000 this year. But depending on what we have coming up, Anthony always says we should budget several $1,000s because it just, he anticipates that happening. A lot of times people will say, never mind, we aren't going to do it. And so then it backs out, but that's why we budget what we budget, because that's what we actually anticipate happening. As for the rest of it, the only other major increase in that category is weed cutting. We did budget $6,000 for that. We're only anticipating collecting about $3,700 this year. We have a new lawn service that is higher cost, so we are budgeting a little bit more for weed cutting revenues. In the next category, which is fines and forfeits, which would be like our court and traffic, you will notice that has actually gone down from budget and gone up only a little bit from actual. We budgeted $966,000 in traffic fines for this fiscal year. We're only on track to really collect about $99,700. So we reduced that estimate for fines and living fines to $110,000. So we reduced that significantly for next fiscal year. And then the last section is miscellaneous revenue. You will notice that we have for the emergency social services, that number has increased because we'll have an entire full year of salary for the social services coordinator that will be reimbursed, or at least half of that salary will be reimbursed from City of Richmond Heights. We have the money for the emergency social service or the emergency services fund that is in the budget, as well as that was discussed last week with the executive, as well as some of her other expenses like fuel and other things like that that she uses that will be reimbursed by the city of Richmond Heights. Excuse me. And that is really about it. The only other thing is we don't have any projected sale of assets for this fiscal year, so that has gone down to zero. Where we had some projected sales of assets for this fiscal year.
What was the deal with the $1 million that only 81,000 came in?
Which one was that?
Other revenue last year budgeted $1 million.
Oh, it was put into other accounts. So that was one of the things that I last year, I was trying to identify all the things that just were thrown into other revenue. I was trying to put them into the accounts where they really should go. There's some training and putting things in the right accounts. And so that's one of the things that we identified this year and have moved stuff to the right accounts. Because we had stuff that just kind of was put there because they didn't know where to go with it. And so we just have started putting it where it belongs.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I try not to have a lot of other, if I can. Are there any questions? Okay, so if we go on to the next one, we have, this is the police, fire and pension fund. This is a property tax that we charge, that is collected every year. It is used only to pay for the police and firefighters' retirement, their portion of the pension. Again, we are anticipating a little bit of an increase because it is a reassessment year. And we are hoping that the interest continues to go up next year for our investments. We believe that we're having a pretty good year so far this year, and we anticipate having a decent year next year as well in our investment revenue. Any questions about that one? Okay, so. Okay, sorry. The next one is special business district. This one is also it's a property tax that we charge every year. This year, we do actually have higher revenue than what we are budgeting for next year, and that is because we have collected a lot of past due balances. So we have gotten caught up with almost all of our business licenses now. We're really close. And so we are reducing what we anticipate our revenue to be next year since we've gotten caught up. Yeah, so that's really why there's that bigger difference there. Okay, any questions about that one? Right now? This one is the trust. It's called trust and agency, and it's basically our sorry about that. It's our escrow account, which is where if we're going to have somebody do a demolition, we have them make a deposit. And I remember correctly, the Public Works Director was explaining that he increased that deposit for if somebody's going to do a demolition and they stop at midway and don't finish it, that we hold on to that money and we'll use that money to reimburse ourselves to finish that demolition. If they finish the demolition as per our code, then we refund them that demolition money. So it's just held. We don't actually get any of this money. It's held and it gets refunded generally. I don't know that we've had to keep anything since I've been here. I think everything's been refunded. Okay, so the next category that we have is the Hanley Road Special Allocation Fund. I know you can't read all of that, but that's what that is. That again is a property tax. That is our tax increment financing. That is the tax increment funding, but tax increment financing bonds that we have. This money, we collect it, and whatever we collect, we send over to the bank to pay off our bond debt. So we don't hold on to any of this money. And we are estimating collecting about $400,000 next year. And we're hoping to stay at about $800,000 in sales tax, because that is specific to the shopping area of where it's at. So it's not all of shopping, it's only the specific area for that actual redevelopment project. So we are anticipating staying pretty steady there, which we went over back when we did the debt service. Beginning of March, I want to say, is when we went through that one. It was a while ago. The next fund is the capital improvement sales tax fund. We are anticipating some growth there. We're budgeting about 100,000. I guess maybe not quite. I guess probably more like about $60,000 additional revenue in sales tax for capital improvement sales tax. The biggest issue for capital improvement sales tax for this year is we have no grant revenue. This current year, we have $1.2 million in grant revenue. Next year, we have none. The Manchester Road project is completed, so we aren't getting any of that federal money. So that's why we don't have a big federal program that we're working on next year. We are anticipating about $30,000 in other revenues, which could be anything from interest to like reimbursements and things like that. So we do get some small like reimbursements from MoDOT and things for different things that we train in. So, but they're not big dollar ones. The next division that we have is parks, and parks. We are going to go ahead and say at the $1.5 million for next year. We're thinking we're going to collect $1.5 million, $12,000 this current year. That's a lot of money for us to collect in this fund historically, and so I felt more comfortable leaving this at $1.5 million. Why that one is so high this year, I can't really tell you. I don't know if it's, I don't know, but I just don't see that. It's just odd to me. It's a lot of money. So I didn't want to increase it and expect it to continue to grow that way. It grew a lot this year. I just don't expect it to continue. And I think it stuck out more in this fund than any of the other funds because that is its sole funding. So I think that's why it really kind of jumped out at me on that one. Then the next one we have is the sewer lateral fund. We are anticipating collecting about $115,000 this year. Next year, we only collected $82,600. We had a lot of things that were held in, that's the word I'm looking for. They're paid under protest. We had a lot of things that were held and that have not been resolved yet. So I'm thinking we'll get some of those in the next fiscal year, and they will not come in through this fiscal year. So that's why I'm thinking that we're waiting. That's why I think that the next year is going to be a little bit higher than this fiscal year. Any questions on any of this? I know this is very interesting. Okay, so the next one is the police asset forfeiture, police asset sharing fund, which basically it's money that they receive from like participating with the major case squad, things like that. We haven't received any money in a long time. We don't anticipate receiving any money for quite a while, but we still have this fund. There is a balance in there, but we don't expect any revenue from it. But I did want to keep it in there just so that you were aware. The next item we have is the fire sales tax. And this one, the anomaly on this one here is that we had an adjustment that we had to do with the audit for this fiscal year. So last fiscal year, when the audit was done, we normally you would accrue two months of sales tax. Like sales tax I receive in July and August is what I would accrue to go to the prior year. For some reason, the year before, not this past year, but the year before, they only accrued 1 month. So it makes this number lower than it really should be. It should actually be higher than what it is because it only accrued 1 month. So they actually had to go in and take an extra month out of this fiscal year, even though they took an extra month out of this fiscal year because they had to get it caught up. So 1 year is going to be short, and unfortunately it's this year that it's short. So it should be about 1.6, and it should be that pretty much steady with the steady growth. That shouldn't be anything major growth, but it should be a 1.6 and going up. As you remember, we did have it was a quarter cent, and then it went to a half cent. So that was the difference there. And then see, what's the next one? Oh, solid waste. Okay, the next one is solid waste. Again, we are anticipating about $640,000 in property tax for solid waste. That's a tax and it's a reassessment year. The real variable in this is the trash tag, sale of trash tags and trash bags. We pretty much are pretty steady, right around $500 in trash bags, and we're 20,000 kind of variance there at the 20,000 mark for the trash tags, but we've been pretty steady there, so that's why we went ahead and kept it at that same dollar amount. The next one we have is Cambridge Commons. This is another redevelopment program that we have with tax increment financing bond. It is all property tax. There are no sales taxes because it's their homes. All the money that is collected is sent over to the bank. The bank then uses that money to pay off the bonds. So we are anticipating about $100,000 in real property next fiscal year that will be used to pay off those bonds. Let's switch to Deer Creek. For Deer Creek, we are anticipating about $500,000 in property taxes. Our sales taxes, we're going to estimate at about $900,000. And then we have a CID, which we're going to drop back down to $165,800. And the CID is a community improvement district tax. That's part of that area, the Deer Creek Shopping Center redevelopment project. So those are our estimated revenues for the next fiscal year. And that's kind of what we think we're going to end up. Firehouse bonds. Yes. All right. The next item we have is Firehouse bonds. This is the fund that we use to collect our general obligation bond debt service. So we have general obligation bonds that we use to build the firehouse. We have to pay those bonds off. We set the tax rate at a rate that is required to be able to pay off those bonds. So we set the tax rate every year based on what our fund balance is in that fund versus what our required expenditures are for that year. And that's how that tax rate is set. So you never have a really big fund balance, but you have a little bit in case something happened and all your taxes didn't come in. So it pretty much just cycles in, cycles out as well. And we estimate we always run right around $500,000. And so that's what we're estimating for next fiscal year. And then for the last one is the Proposition P, which is the police department. We are anticipating again about $475,000 for this fiscal year. When we budgeted it for this year, we had budgeted $475,000. I think that budget was a little bit high, but we came in at about we're anticipating coming in about $450,000. I anticipate growth for next year, so that's why we're budgeting the $475,000. Are there any questions about the budget overall? Or I'm sorry, the revenues overall, not budget. Sorry. I was getting way ahead of me. Nope. Okay. All right, then that's all I have for revenue.
Okay, we're going. Okay. So members of council, mayor, I'm going to talk about the consolidated budget summary and refer to my memo that was part of the packet. So I'll probably spend about 15 minutes or so. So please bear with me. Just on page 1 of the memo on the packet, I thought it was important to mention the accomplishments we set forth last year in the as part of the budget, and we've either accomplished or we're moving forward with all those items. Of particular note, on Tuesday, May the 23rd, you will get a presentation on our 5-year plan that we're calling Welcome Maplewood, a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging plan. So we're very excited about that, and we're looking forward to that. And so much more to talk about on May 23rd. And On page 2 of the memo, we just of note again, this was a year where we were not receiving any federal funds. So that was the first, this is the first year in a couple of years that that's the case. Departments were instructed to leverage grant opportunities as much as possible and to try to focus on the ongoing studies we have, the traffic study, the Parks Master Plan, our Welcome Maplewood 5-year plan, and the ADA study as much as possible. Then on pages 2 and 3, you heard throughout the work sessions, all the strategic budget priorities that departments identified that I talked about. I simply listed some of the major strategic budget priorities in the memo. I think that's important for us to track. So that's what you see on pages 2 and 3. I'm not going to read them all. They're there for your review. And then I want to cover on pages 3 and 4. The heading is securing our long-term financial future and building our infrastructure. And I'm actually going to read a good part of this. That was in my memo. So as Maplewood employees continue to provide the excellent service it is known for, we are at a critical time in terms of our general fund and capital improvements budgets. Our overall budget is in average condition with the relatively stable revenue growth as we face high inflation. We've improved our credit rating by not dipping into budget reserves, and we've incorporated strategic priorities from the Maplewood strategic plan into departmental budgets. However, there are some signs of concern in specific areas of our budget while we face increasing infrastructure demands from our residents and businesses. These concerns include the following. We continue to move a significant amount of general fund expenses to the capital improvements budget, which has impacted the capital improvements budget. We have an extremely tight capital improvements budget that funds our infrastructure needs. Next, we have growing infrastructure requests in our city with sidewalk construction, street construction, traffic calming, and ADA infrastructure improvements, all in high demand from our residents. Next, the city of Maplewood operates as a lean organization. Still, we have serious strains on our general fund budget related to personnel costs, and we need to continue to retain, hire, and promote talented and diverse employees so that we can continue to deliver high-quality city services. And last, the last sentence I want to read is, I am not ready to recommend a tax increase. However, the time may be approaching in the next couple of years so that we can maintain Maplewood as a great place to live, work, and play. To kind of put this in context, what is the trigger point, or what are the trigger points? Will we need to lay off employees at some point? Will we need to cut services at some point? Those are certainly things that we'll be looking at in the coming years. One thing we're already facing is somewhat already diminished services associated with capital improvements with street repairs. We're only doing with street repairs because we really have no fund balance. We're only doing one street this year. If this trend continues, it could be a trigger point. If it continues over the next year or two, it's just something for us to look at and consider. So we really need to build up our fund balance in the capital improvements fund. How do we do that? Taking general fund pressure off the capital budget. One way to do that is to increase our general fund revenues. How do we do that? One way to do that is a general fund sales tax increase. Another way to do that is certainly we're going to start to look at, if we can over time, we've been moving general fund expenses into the capital improvements budget over the last couple of years. maybe we stop doing that if we can, because that's been something we've been doing. That's really impacted the capital improvements budget. And maybe over the next year or two, we try to prevent that practice. But so what does all this mean? Again, our budget's in average condition with okay revenue growth. We are living within our means more than ever, because we haven't been dipping into our reserves. There's no need to panic here or anything. There's no action needed now. Or over the course of the year. We're going to monitor things closely over the course of the next fiscal year. And I just wanted you to be aware of some of these concerning signs that we have. This was kind of brought up during our budget town hall too, for those of you that participated in that. People raised this, some of our residents, and we had some discussion about this. So that's where all that stands. Next in the I want to cover is some high level changes since we met last week. Lexi's when in the next section, Lexi will actually show you the actual changes in the budget in the next section of the agenda. So I'm going to speak about 4 items here. I think it's 4 items. First, one of our priorities is to increase the general fund balance, supporting a balanced budget without dipping into our reserves, and continue to increase our fund balance reserves. So we're budgeting to increase our fund balance reserves by $101,478. Last year we did a little over 100,000 as well. So that's important to do that every year. Next, we budgeted for a 4.5% raise, a cost of living adjustment for all employees. Why 4.5%? Several reasons from my perspective. Last year, we only did 2%. Our employees do an excellent job. I'm trying to reward them. Also, a lot of our peer cities, I've talked to 7 or 8 city managers. They are doing much more than this. We can't afford a 6, a 7, and 8% increase. We can't afford that. Many of these cities are. And I'm trying to balance what can we afford and also trying to retain and attract the talent that we've got. So that was sort of the balance. One exception to this is me. You all decide my raise. So for the August anniversary, that's something that is coming up that you will all have to decide. So I wanted to note that. Healthcare, the city will absorb the increase in healthcare costs for employees. And then the final item, before I get into some of the work session topics or work session discussion, is pay parity between police and fire. For the longest time, there's been a pay parity agreement between police and fire in terms of salaries. And there's been a discrepancy for over a decade due to some fire department hiring practices. And this goes back 12 or 14 years. Lexi will get into the details, but we want to make this right. It's the right thing to do. And we are budgeting a 5-year plan that will lift our police officer salaries up so that we can have pay parity again between our police and officers and our firefighters. We can't afford it all in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, but we think it's fiscally responsible to do it over a 5-year period. So those are some of the high level changes. Now we get into work session requests. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed one item. Thank you. Yeah, that was on my next page. Thank you, Lexi.
It is, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. One other item and that we are budgeting for, that is a recommendation out of our Welcome Maplewood Diversity Inclusion plan that we're working on, is training for employees and council members. And so we are budgeting for that in the fiscal year. We hope that we can get someone local and do some on-site training. So that's what our goal is. Now to move on to work session requests. This will include some mayor and council requests and our boards and commissions. The framework that I really looked at here, it's not perfect, but what I tried to do was first off, setting some priorities. What can we afford? Are there alternatives that exist? Does it set a precedent and is it sustainable? So we budgeted $100 for printing flyers for the Elder Fair, $250 for access to skates for the skate events. We are budgeting for membership into the National League of Cities. And there are two conferences that happen in the fiscal year. There is a November 16th to 18th conference. That's a city summit conference in Atlanta. And we budgeted for 3 members to attend that. And if you are interested, please let us know by like late summer or summertime, July, August at the latest. Appropriate arrangements can be made. But so we budgeted for 3 council members to attend that. And then there's a DC legislative conference in March of 2024. And we budgeted for two council members to attend that legislative conference. Again, if you're interested in that, let us know by Thanksgiving. So that's been budgeted for. And then with boards and commissions, there was a request for the Emergency Social Services Fund, which I've commented before during the executive budget. We budgeted for $4,000 total. That will be $2,000 from Maplewood and $2,000 from Richmond Heights. We did budget for $3,000 for an open house for the new foundation that's being formed. And a comprehensive plan was requested by the Plan and Zoning Commission. We are unable to afford the whole thing. And being responsive to the Plan and Zoning Commission and some of the housing and affordability issues we have, we budgeted for $75,000. And the thought would be we could try to budget for the other half in the next fiscal year. And the plan's going to take multiple years anyway to accomplish. So that was the thinking there. And then 2 items that we did not budget for include a solar streetlight system and the balloon glow. And let me just comment on both of those. The solar streetlight system, there certainly is merit to the Kensington area needing more light. There was an upgrade of lighting along Kensington with LED lighting by Ameren at no cost to the city of Maplewood. The Sustainability Commission recommended a solar streetlight system of $11,500 in a specific area of Kensington. The challenge with that is we've essentially depleted our capital improvements budget, which I talked about earlier. It's down to $55,000 and change. And we did have an alternative available to upgrade the lighting there. So that's why I did not budget for it. And then the balloon glow, the Parks and Recreation Commission had recommended this. I did not budget for this. My opinion on this is that this should be a privately sponsored event. We already have a balloon glow event in September, less than 3 miles away. I think the costs and staffing needs were underestimated, and we do not have the capacity from a staffing standpoint. So that's the conclusion of my summary. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I know I'm new, I might have, but with the city council, did they provide like a statement of work? And I just missed breaking down like the number of hours, the amount of time that it would take, because That's a lot of money, and I'm trying to figure out, like, I just know corporate stuff, and I know, like, we would bring on a firm for that. I would have seen a lot more details about compliance, like what went into that total, and I think, did I miss that?
You did not, they did
Okay.
not, they did not provide that.
I had a lot of trouble with being like, yeah, sure, it's 150 grand, that's the going rate.
Yeah.
You know,
I think they modeled it after the Richmond Heights comprehensive plan, which is going on or just finishing up now, and the cost for that was 150,000.
are there a lot of firms around the globe that do that? Like, I think I just, it's totally new to me, and I'm sorry, I'm asking very basic.
No, there are.
Okay.
Yeah, we would, if we proceeded with this or a variation of it.
Yeah.
At some form, we would obviously pursue a competitive process to get the best price. But so I understand it is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And
And I think what it is, I don't have a frame of reference for what it entails to update a comprehensive plan. Time and like logistics on that, but that's one of those things where I'm just kind of like, what does the money go to relative to how much money it is? So, but if it's one of those things where we're too, if we're trying to loose estimate out before we even start getting bids, it might be a part before the court's like much, so I don't know, right?
no, they're good questions. I don't have answers to all of them.
Right? They share whatever.
Pardon?
But seriously, though, like, we have to provide something out like a statement of work or like. Not-
Sure.
like, I'd just be interested to see.
I had similar thoughts and I don't want to reverse engineer what we want the outcome to be so that we can know how much we want to invest in it. Because it's not just what does it cost to get it done? Is it worth $150,000 to the community? That was sort of a quick, and I get that we slated in at the budget, so I know that doesn't mean we're spending 150 grand. But it would just seem very quick, like we need it, we're like, yep, we'll do it. So I think we all want to talk about it.
Sure.
Okay, okay. No, you go ahead, because it'll be, this is just, I'm gonna read Sean's statement and then I'm kind of gonna,
Yeah, so, thinking about the comprehensive plan, with planning and zoning, and I've talked to them a little bit and I've seen what they're doing. And my concern with the comprehensive plan right now, like specifically right at this moment, is I feel like we are in a really dire state with affordable housing. Like, I feel like we really need to be proactive in a way that's going to help people as quick and as effectively as possible. So what I think is more effective, or what would be a better way to spend that money, would be using that money to go through, having somebody professionally go through our planning and zoning ordinances under an instructed lens of our affordable housing and DEI, and see what we can do to be effective. What could we add to our zoning ordinances that's going to help? What could we remove? We obviously have a comprehensive plan that is not in line with where we want to move forward. So obviously there's going to be things that are in our planning and zoning that need to be taken out. And I just think it would be a lot more effective if we were able to spend that money professionally, to have somebody do that. We tried to do that with the ordinance review committees, and I think there was some great work done with that. But I think like we could really launch off of that and do something really effective with that amount of money. With that being said, too, I think a comprehensive plan is important in the future. I just don't see that as like the most direct, effective way to tackle some affordable housing.
Go ahead. And I would just add, I happened to lose a boss not so long ago to a nonprofit that does this kind of work, so I know they exist. So it'd be interesting to investigate, are there universities, nonprofits, are there groups out there that do similar work? They may do cost recovery, so there might be some cost, but it might be 30 or 40 or 50,000 instead of 150.
you're talking about the comprehensive plan.
Yeah,
I agree.
groups that do
I
that
agree.
work. Because there's a lot that I think we already know about ourselves as a community that we don't have to discover that often you would in that process. And so if we could sort of shortcut it, we could probably save some bucks that way.
To piggyback off of that, what you just said, we have so many surveys and responses from surveys which goes to what you said, where we know who we are as a community because our community has spoken to us. We know what priorities are. So I don't see 150 grand for this being necessary. I understand why Richmond Heights may have needed that. And I recall seeing signs on the side of the road. I would drop my son off to the elementary and there was a sign there and it was like, take this survey. We are surveyed out, y'all. Okay. So it's like, we don't need that. And I know that part of any study is going to be substantial, right? Okay. So I'm going to read this. I'm going to read a part of Sean's email to us because he couldn't make it since we're on the topic of the comprehensive plan. So he said, I'm not sure we are, okay, as for the comprehensive zoning plan, I'm not sure we are there yet. Since we have been able to carry out our objectives and vision for the city up to this point, I think the money would be better spent with someone, company, consultant that could clean up, incorporate DEI and modernize our municipal code before we begin the comprehensive zoning plan. So I think, yeah. So I think what I understand from council is we all see that the house is on fire and the house is named ordinances, right? Okay.
Yeah, you can ignore the comprehensive plan, you know, I mean, the ordinances are there and they're saying, this is it, this is where we're going and this is what we need to do.
Yes, and the work that our planning and zoning is doing right now is very progressive. And it would be nice to see them have some expertise in progressive zoning laws. And them not have to do so much heavy lifting that they're doing because they are not experts in this field. So I would like to see some of the 75,000 that the plan and zoning has asked for. Some of the money that they've asked for the comprehensive plan, some of that to be put aside for a comprehensive plan, because I think we do need that. But some of this money to be put aside to hire someone that can assist with the ordinances. I really have no problem letting the Plan and Zoning Commission know, like, hey, y'all, we appreciate that. We agree with you, but we think that the house that's on fire right now is ordinances, and we'd like to get you help for that.
I think they would agree.
I know for a fact that they're going to be very appreciative of that. I know that that's the hardest part and they're working their butts off. They really are. I've been in those meetings and I've met with some of them and they're really working on this really hard. And I think having somebody that can really steer them in that right, solid direction that where we all want to go and they have already been wanting to go, I think that's going to be amazing.
Okay, so let me go into the lighting. So I'll read what Sean said and then I'll speak on it. As Ameren's lighting is woefully inadequate in many areas of Maplewood, we should begin setting aside monies for additional lighting on Kensington Avenue and other areas of Maplewood. Setting aside monies so we can pay for one every couple of years would be fiscally responsible. Excuse me. So the lighting really came up when I was running for mayor. I recall we would phone bank, and when we would phone bank and talk to residents of Maplewood, we'd ask them, well, what's your concern? Lighting came up a lot. Then we had surveys. Lighting came up a lot. It's a safety issue. And I understand that the capital improvement budget that we have right now is tight. And so my suggestion is to take 5,000 from the 75 that we have, we're talking about allocating for that comprehensive plan and just setting that aside so we can slowly build up enough money to get a solar lighting or solar lighting system. I understand, Mr. Reese, that you said Ameren has been out there, changed the bulbs. I'm just relying upon what our community members that serve on the Sustainability Commission presented to us, and they were still telling us Kensington. If that is not needed on Kensington, then like, then like, Councilmember Fockingham stated in his email to us, it's needed somewhere else. I'd like to give the Sustainability Commission an opportunity to tell us where it's needed, see how it works, and then they can collect data and come back to us and say, okay, hey, this is how this is working, you know, and hopefully it's better than what Ameren would charge us to put something up on a dark street. So that's what I would request, that council talk about right now, consider and ultimately approve.
One of the things I was thinking about with this too is, I don't think this would be in scope for this year by any means, but if we're looking at repeatedly doing any kind of solar lighting structure, there's got to be some kind of grants for that. That is sustainable, that is a reliance issue, that's a resiliency issue. So like, is that something where we can start exploring if there's some kind of like federal or state or any kind of like grant money that can help us offset additional requests to do this? Because, you know, maybe it's worth looking. There probably is. I mean, I know like the ARPA funds don't cover this because that's like water, sewer, and broadband. But there's got to be other funds out there we could at least try for.
Yeah, I would just amplify and agree that starting to cobble together some money for this issue, it's funny the things that we talk about the most versus what we get called about the most. And it seems to be traffic and lights and sidewalks, like the basic safety stuff is what so far in my 2 years is basically all I've ever heard about, weirdly. So I think I like Sean's idea of, irrespective of it's Kensington or somewhere else, let's start building a pot of money so we can do some of this work.
Yeah, I also agree with Sean. I do think Kensington still needs some attention. There's a great deal of foot traffic there coming to and from Greenwood Park. And I think it seems even darker this time of year until fall when there's foliage out. Because not as much of the street light, even with LED improvements, it has improved, but I think it looks different in November than it does in July. Because it's still dark with all the foliage out. That's one of the great things about Maplewood. I don't know if the solar street light system addresses that, but I do think more light in general could increase illumination there. And to me, it's just a safety issue. So I do think Kensington still needs some attention, but I'm certainly in support of starting to get money in the bucket to address lighting issues throughout town. Yeah, again, another echo. I got a light behind my house, and I tell you what, I didn't really appreciate what that was doing for the safety of my family, just coming home from baseball at 8 o'clock at night, right? Until the couple of days that light went out. And so it really cemented into my brain that, you know, that light does give you a really good sense of security in where you live, and it gives you that sense of safety. So I support that. And I definitely think we should be, you know, putting some money together on an ongoing basis to make sure that every corner that we have that we're concerned about gets covered.
If I can just respond a little bit, and I don't disagree that we need to address lighting. And I think if you want to do it in a comprehensive way and do it right, we really need to build up our fund balance in our capital improvements budget. Because that's where we fund our infrastructure, and that's the way we would fund lighting. And right now it's at 55,000, and we've continued to put general fund expenses into the capital improvements budget, thereby hurting the capital improvements budget. And we really need to build up that fund balance to address all the things that we talked about from an infrastructure standpoint, including lighting, and to do it in a comprehensive, thoughtful way. That's, I think, the best way to do it. If you take 5,000, Mayor, let me ask, why are you suggesting just 5,000 from the comprehensive plan? What?
Because, I mean, the $11,500 amount that Sustainability Commission is asking for against $75,000 that's going towards 150, I really thought that $5,000 was a nominal amount, and it wouldn't take us very long to save up to get to the 11,500. So they wouldn't get it this year. They may not even get it, next budget year. They may need to wait, but still we can have that going. In the meantime, Sustainability Commission can continue to do a light survey throughout the city to directly advise us in the city, like, hey, this is where this should go as far as lighting is concerned. So that's the reason why I gave the amount of, I suggested 5,000.
Understand, okay.
I was just gonna add, I'd be fine with it being a number lower than 5,000. I'm fine with 5,000, but I think we have to get it started somewhere. And my fear is that if we wait to stabilize the capital improvement budget, something else comes along that is a higher priority and we have to make a decision. So I think acting now to move some funds into that bucket starts this and gets us on a track to stabilize things in the future.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just going to show the community that, we're moving towards what they're asking for. I've had two conversations with people about lighting and I haven't even been in very long. So
To try to wrap this all up, the comprehensive plan discussion, which I can be supportive of, breaking that up into an ordinance effort, figure out what we call that.
Oh, yeah.
And a comp plan piece, breaking that up. And I'll talk with Anthony and I'll talk with my staff about the amounts respectively, and we'll come up with a proposal, because we have to get ready for the May 23rd session and finalize this thing. So that makes some sense. Was there something else associated with that comprehensive plan? It was just breaking that up so that we accomplish. Okay, and then on the lighting, let me digest this and see how we can come up with something that meets council's directive here, kind of realizing that it might not be something immediate.
I think we all understand it's not immediate. When we're talking about the solar lighting, we know it's not immediate. And because you have told us our capital improvement fund is so low, I definitely do not want y'all to come back to us and say, okay, well, we're going to set 3,000 aside from the capital improvement fund because it's so low. But I just wanted, let me ask, I talked to you and asked you this question, and it was just you and me, but let me ask it in front of the council. It is not against the law. It's not against Missouri law, okay, for us to take a part of the 75,000 that you've proposed and put that aside for this solar lighting system. Is that correct?
Not against the law.
Okay. I just want to make sure. Say that out
Could we
loud.
use the word fungible? I just like that word. Fungible. So in all seriousness, I do have an answer about this. So what we're saying is, okay, we want to spend right out of our capital budget, which is only at $55,000 right now. So we're saying we want to fill up the budget bucket before we pour the water back out of it. And we're saying, let's just take a little water out of the hose while we're filling the bucket. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I understand what we're saying here.
I think so. So we're saying, okay, so Councilmember Holmes said, yeah. The Councilmember said that he did not want to wait for the capital improvement budget bucket to become full of water, because he thinks, and I agree, that something else is going to come up that's going to take priority over the solar system lighting. And so to the hose that you're talking about, we got $75,000 coming out of the hose, and we're saying, well, we're gonna divert 5,000 of it over here, and then, okay.
Sure. Okay, just so I have clarity for my mind. So the thought is to divert 5,000 from general fund to capital, in which would increase the capital fund balance for next fiscal year. Instead of being 55,000, it would show that we'd have a balance of 60,000, a fund balance of 60,000, with the caveat that 5,000 of that is set aside for lighting.
Yes.
Okay,
That's the way I understand.
okay. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding it correctly, because I've got to figure out a way to document it somehow.
Yes.
Not sure how I'm gonna do it, but I will figure it out. Yeah. Mhm. Okay,
Well, it doesn't seem like that's a policy, it's just, we're just giving a directive on.
Right.
what-
but I want to be able to
I get
track that on my
We're
end.
not trying to set up a fund or something.
No,
it's
yeah.
Like.
Right.
That's.
But I want to track it on my end that if we divert 5,000 this year and 5,000 next year, that it's 10,000, not just 5,000. I want to be able to find a way to track that on my end, so.
Okay, so I have a question about budgeting for the solid raise, the 4.5% cost of living adjustment. My question is, excuse me, when we have the cost of living adjustment, will there also be merit-based raises going on simultaneously with this increase of the COLA?
There won't be any merit raises, but what I am going to be doing for the future, I am instituting evaluations. And I'll be doing evaluations of my employees for the first time in the next 30 days. I'm actually doing this and actively like this week but I'll be putting in place evaluations, holding people accountable. And so in future years, I expect to have probably a combination of cost of living and merit. So there may be, I'm just giving an example here, don't hold me to this, but there may be, a 2.5% for everybody. And for those employees that are deserving, get a 1% or something like that. It might be a hybrid. We might do something like that in the future. But I very much want to put in place an evaluation system that rewards employees for, good work and also holds people accountable accordingly. So this is just going to be a cost of living for all employees.
I know the mayor has more to say, but just on that, I just want to say I like that idea and I'm very supportive of having, those, working with the staff to make sure we'll understand where we are and having those merit. I think that'll do as much or more than the across the board increase, frankly. So great.
We've not had, my understanding is for a long time, we've not had evaluations done in the city of Maplewood, period.
Yeah, it's not even a long time. It's ever. Yeah, thank you. Yes, it is. Okay, so going back to the COLA. I support this. My concern is it sustainable? And so because of my concern, my question is, have you all projected 5 years out how this is going to be able to be sustainable? And we're not at a point where 5 years out, 7 years out, we have to have a hiring freeze, we have to have a salary freeze because this is no longer sustainable. Because correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest part of our budget is going to be our employee salaries and benefits, right?
Personnel.
Yeah. So I'm just concerned about being able to sustain this. So have you all talked about that and the projection of it?
We have not projected 5 or 7 years out. We have looked out a year or two, and I do believe it's sustainable. Based on our revenue growth that we've seen over the last year or two, and that we think is going to continue. I do believe it's sustainable. That doesn't still mean that. Let me back up for a second. I don't anticipate doing 4.5% every year. Okay, I kind of see this as a little bit of an anomaly because we only did 2% last year, and so I see 4.5% being a little bit of an anomaly. So I do believe it's sustainable. I'm not going to be in a position that we need a tax increase to fund people's raises, right? That's not the position that I also want to be in, because that's not going to be the case either.
So that was going to lead me to my next question / it's not a question, it's a concern. I have serious concerns with even having a conversation about the possible necessity of a tax increase, a sales tax increase that is going to seriously harm our businesses, seriously. So for me, I understand that you're talking to us about it and you're not ready to recommend it, but my request, and I'm only one person on this council, but my request is this, we gotta be in the burning building, please, before you come to us and tell us that you recommend this. So I need for y'all to look at everything else before you come to this, because I don't know if our community will support this. Our community is the one that will say yay or nay. And I'm telling you right now, I don't support it.
And I don't either of this, to be clear. It's very premature. But my simple reason for putting it in here is some of the warning signs that we've got. That if the trend continues, then we need to start having more serious discussions about it.
So I don't even know how to ask this question, but if we're seeing some of these warning signs, right? So we're seeing some flags come up that we're worried about, and we're doing some other things that are going to cause more red flags to come up. I mean, are we doing anything proactive to contradict what, to stop that from happening, I guess is what I'm trying to ask, right? Like,
I mean, I think, as I said earlier, we're gonna look at as Lexi and I have talked about, trying to move things back into the general fund. So we may get a request in future years for a comp plan or from boards and commissions to do things. And I might say no, we may have to say no, because the right decision is, rather than spending money on a planning effort, is to use that money instead to, free up our capital improvements budget, if you follow me, and save the money. So those are things that we want to take a hard look at, and that would be an example of doing everything that we can before we recommend the very last option. Also grants, that's brought up here earlier. We're pretty aggressive about going after grants. What can we do? We're going to double back on that. What else can we do to go after grants? We're pretty good at developing partnerships with Richmond Heights and lots of other cities. What else can we do on that front? So we're going to look at everything we can. And this would be a last resort. Again, there's just some warning signs that I wanted to make you aware of. And we need to see what the trend shows over a couple of years.
So I just had a couple of comments about a couple of things the mayor brought up, the 4.5%. And we talked, it just struck me, that's a pretty healthy number. I also recognize we had 7% inflation. And what I kind of needed to hear and need to know is that that's a catch up, that we're lagging behind our neighbors. And, that's the point of that is, and you said that unprompted, so that's sort of helpful. So I just wanted to comment that, that's a general, at least in my experience. And, we talked government employee, nonprofit employee. It's a different context, but that seems right on the edge of what we can get away with. And then in terms of the long term and the tax thing, the thing that keeps occurring to me is, just listening to all these budget sessions as these TIFs start to roll off, we got a lot of financial advantage coming our way, and just to make sure that we're taking advantage of that, and rather than just like seeing it with like, oh, good, we get to spend more, like, let's use those moments to start banking or whatever, so we can avoid that long term. So to me, that's our one hope out of this, without tax increase or something else scary, would be to manage those roll back ons of normal tax situations. So that.
Yeah, and kind of piggybacking off that, when you're talking about some red flags, is that basically just the expenditures we're trying to do? Because I don't recall noticing in the budget's concerns that we're going to have reduced sales taxes due to losing businesses or things like that. So I just want to make sure, like, is that does that concern come from a place of looking at expenditures or looking at greater economic trends in Maplewood itself? Or St. Louis County, given that a lot of our shoppers that come into like Maplewood Commons don't even live in Maplewood?
So it's really more on our expenditures. It's in, right now, we have this tight budget. A lot of it has to do with, we have a lot of plans that have a lot of implementation costs over the next couple of years that are taxing certain funds right now. And so that's why we see some of these things. So that's really where we're at. And then if we want to continue to add other big dollar projects, that does become taxing.
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking off what you were saying, either we're gonna skate along and be okay until more money starts freeing up after those funds are, no longer needing to be paid into, or we're potentially going to be issues.
And just so council's clear, I would not ever recommend a tax increase unless we exhausted all the other possibilities. From experience in Ohio, and I have experience in Columbus where we even cut some services and did some strategic layoffs and did some things on that front before we went for a tax increase. And so, I'm not saying that we would do that, but there may be some things that we would do there first as well. And we're not there yet. We're not there yet. But it would be a last resort type thing.
I just have one more thing. I wanted to go back to the conferences.
Yes.
And just verify that the conferences that I requested to go to are in our budget. Okay, so council, I just want you all to know that I have made requests for specific conferences. I think I requested 3. So I will not be attending the conferences that Mr. Reese spoke about this evening. That is available for y'all.
Yeah, sure. And just for council's understanding, the mayor's travel or conferences are always part of the executive budget, and then all the rest of the council is part of legislative. So
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you.
budget, if you don't see her conferences, that's why, because legislative is just all the council, and then the mayor's part of executive. So someone will look at some point and they won't see it and they'll be concerned. And I promise they're there.
Is it okay if we move on?
Yeah.
We have one more section. This won't take very long. This is just the action.
2 seconds. Well, yeah, well, it's gonna take a minute. That'll make it quick.
Yeah, let me see some
You already said it.
You won't take away. All right.
consolidated budget. Right?
Yes. Okay. All right. So. I'm gonna be quick. I'm gonna take a minute. So this next section here is consolidated budget. I wanted to show this to you. This is a summary of our operation budget. I wonder if I can make this a little, no, I can't. All right, so y'all don't know what these numbers mean, that I do, so that's good. So again, we have, sorry, we have actual budget, forecast and budget. So this top one here, this 101, this is actually the legislative budget, which is council budget. So as you can see, we are budgeting $72,818 in total expenses for next fiscal year, and this is including all of your the conferences that we had discussed. There is a decrease here, and part of that is because as we discussed when we did the legislative budget, that decrease, if you remember, had to do with the lawsuit that was the web lawsuit that was settled. So that's why there is a decrease, but there is, I promise, money for the conferences there. The next department section is executive, which is executive and the mayor, and that is $1,919,000. So it's about $100,000 more than what we're actually spending this year. And that is what we have budgeted total expenses for next year. For the next one, it is what we call our legal department, or it's courts, and that's $410,000 for next fiscal year. That one went down some because of, I'm sorry, the first one, legislative, went down because we don't have the DEI project is over with. This one goes down because of the web lawsuit. Sorry, I got that backward. That's why it's only 410,000 because it was higher. And then this final one down here, there's 1.6 million. That is public works. So total general fund expenditures, general fund budgets of $4,016,565 for next fiscal year. So, and so these are all just totals. So, and then I'll go through all the sheets and all the changes that we made. So all of these have already been presented to you. This $1,781,519 is the pension fund expense. 130,947 is special business district. The 1,091,000 is the Hanley Road special allocation. The 1,897,000 is capital improvement sales tax. This section here is the parks. It's the half cent parks capital improvement fund. So the first one, which is all zeros, was the swimming pool bonds. The second one is the Parks and Recreation Department, which is $1.1 million. It's actually a little bit less than what we're anticipating spending this fiscal year. The swimming pool is $406,000. Capital improvements are $823,000. There's a lot of parks capital improvements next fiscal year. The sewer lateral fund is only $66,000. As we discussed, we've gotten caught up on our list and we're no longer have the big backlog of sewer lateral to repair. The police asset sharing, that's a police asset sharing fund that they don't get any revenue. They do have money to use in there. They have a small fund balance. They are allowed to use that. They can only use it for police items. And so it is truly, and it's up to their discretion as to what they use it for. Generally, they use it for something that comes up that's a small dollar amount that they didn't budget for, that they need. So we budget $5,000. They may or may not spend it. This year they did. They had to buy ammunition because it didn't come in. They had to pay for ammunition because they had budgeted in the previous fiscal year. It didn't come in time to be charged to that fiscal year, and they didn't budget for it for this fiscal year. So they had to use that. The next one is fire sales tax, and that's going up to $3,436,000. The next one is $587,792 is solid waste disposal. $75,000 is the Cambridge Commons, which is the TIF. The Deer Creek Special Allocation Fund is the $1.3 million, and that is also a TIF. Firehouse bonds is $398,000. And the Prop P funds are expenditures, which is the police department, because all the Prop P is police, is $5,135,531. So what this means, and this is where, went too far. Hold on. Okay. Sorry, I had to mute myself. I muted myself. Okay. This form here. So this, it's kind of a long form, but basically it starts out with general fund and what our beginning balance, our beginning fund balance is. So this is where I estimate us being at the beginning as of July 1st, 2023. So it takes what our fund balance was as of June 2022, June 30, 2022, adds in what our projected revenues are, what our projected expenses are for this fiscal year, and says this is where we're going to be for all these funds. These consolidated non-major funds, those are things like Cambridge Commons, Deer Creek Special Allocation Fund, things like that. So I do have detail on all of those, but the ones that I have highlighted are major funds, the ones that we use on our major operating funds. Then this second column here is the revenues and projected revenues for this fiscal year, as well as then our projected appropriations. Now, as you remember, fire department is budgeted out of the fire sales tax. Police department is budgeted out of the Prop P funds. Obviously, $475,000 is not enough to be able to pay for our police force. So we supplement that with general fund revenue. Same as with the fire department, we supplement them. Fire department collects more in revenue, so they receive less in general fund revenue from us. Police department receives less, so they receive more. So these two numbers here add up to this. This $5,000 here is $5,000 that is coming out of capital and going into the sewer lateral fund. So that way we had a total of $70,000 in sewer lateral. If you remember from when we were last week's budget session. So this shows the total change in the fund balance. So as you can see, we're budgeting to put $101,478,000 into general fund balance. We're dipping into almost every other fund balance for the next fiscal year. Some fairly significantly, such as the capital improvement sales tax, which is down to $55,053. The one fund balance that we can't dip into is our general fund balance. Otherwise, we will go back on watch and risk being downgraded for our S&P, our Standard & Poor's rating. So we're AA, we want to say AA. So that's the only one we can't dip into. We can dip into capital and we can use all of these reserve funds. That's what they're there for. They're there to be utilized when we need them. We just obviously don't want to go negative, and we obviously want this capital one to grow in the future. So that's basically the summary of where our budget is based on our expenditures and revenues for the year. So then this next section is really the section that's going to go pretty quick, if you all will bear with me. What I was going to do is just go through and show you the highlighted parts of what was changed as was requested during all of the different budget sessions. So it's all the stuff that Michael's already mentioned, and I'm just going to show you where we've added that into the budget to make that change. So for legislative, really, yes, we. Oh, yeah. Is that big enough for one more? Okay. So for legislative, we did add the community well-being for the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging training, as was requested during the legislative budget hearing. We did that both for the existing and the new initiatives. And then that was the only change that was made for that part of it. And then if you get into here, you will see that, oops, one of them didn't get highlighted, which was the memberships, that this changed to $5,800. And this changed to $26,500. And the travel and conference went from $0 to $10,000. So the reason why for that is if we go to the next couple of pages where the detail is, you will see that membership for membership dues National League of Cities was added back in, which is why that's highlighted. The DEI training amount was added back in above the $1,500 that was originally in that account for the 501c3 creation. And then the $10,000 for the travel conference for the National League of Cities. And then, well, I really hope this was highlighted yellow, but apparently it wasn't. This should have been highlighted yellow because these are the two conferences that were added in as well. And those are the only changes that we had in legislative. For executive, we had a few more changes. As we had discussed, the salary 4.5% increase was added in, as was the cost of living, or what, as was the insurance absorption. That was also added.
Yeah. I got a lot. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
And then if we go to the next page, you will see again, this is regular. Oh, it's a little bit too big. Too far. Okay, this is regular salaries. And again, the insurance that both show that those were increased from what they were before. On the next page, this gas and oil, that was increased by $2,600. And that was for fuel for the social services coordinator for travel that she does within the community and in the surrounding areas. And half of that will be reimbursed. So 1,300 of that is part of the reimbursement from Richmond Heights that was included in the revenue. The other changes that we had was the $4,000 that the manager mentioned that he was budgeting for the emergency social services. And then there was an increase here to $22,350 for special events. And then if I go to those pages for the detail,
May I ask a question about the special events? Would you just remind me? Because I think it I think it was like 19,000. What caused it to go up?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, so this is the gas and fuel and shows that we added in and emergency social services. And then here for the special events, oops, here it goes, special events, last page, oops, sorry. This one is the $4,000 for the emergency social services, and then when we get down here to the special events, this is where we added in the elder fair, the skate event, and the open house. So all three of those were added in at the end. And those are the only other changes in executive. For legal, the only changes that we had there was we had the cost of living increase the cost of living increase and the insurance increase. So it shows up there, and then it'll show up again over here on this page as well, both regular salaries and insurance. And those are the only changes that we had for legal. So this one, we're probably gonna have to change, but this is, when does this, I mean, Public Works, I assume, right? Yeah, Public Works. We had added in that the comprehensive plan was added in. Obviously, if it's not a comprehensive plan, whatever that is changed to, I'll need to change that to reflect what that code ordinance review. I'm not sure what that's gonna be called, but whatever they determine that it's going to be called is what that will say as that new initiative that's being done for the year. And then again, we have the cost of living increase as well as the insurance increase. And then again, for the regular salaries and the insurance, it shows it again. And then the professional services shows the increase of the $75,000, which was for the comprehensive plan that now we're going to change that number a little bit. So I assume that'll go down to 77,000 because we'll move 5,000 of that over to. Not sure how I'm going to show that, but I will. I will show it somehow to show the 5,000 going into capital. I'll figure it out. I might just do an overall transfer of $5,000 and then buy people the easiest way. That's probably how I'll do it. And then those are the only, excuse me, the only changes made in capital or in Public Works. And then, oops, again, as you can see here, this will be updated as well to no longer have the phase 1 of the comprehensive plan. It'll be the ordinance. I'm not sure what it's called. It's not ordinance review. Overhaul, let's go with overhaul. All right, I'll take that. I was like, it's not review because we've done ordinance review, so it's not that. So that doesn't really work.
Yes.
Modernization.
That was Sean.
Yeah. There you go.
That's the only thing. That's what we're talking
Modernization, that's good. All right, what is this? Special business district. We didn't have any changes in special business district. Actually, I think the only other account that we had any changes in, or fund that we had any changes in, was the Parks Department. And I take my next one. Well, the only other fund change that we have is in the Parks Department, and that would be for the salaries and the insurance for the Parks Department. And eventually I'll get to that, and that'll be the only other change that we have. Actually, it's coming here pretty quick. There it is. There it is. Again, it shows the cost of living increase, both for this cost of living increase and the insurance increase. And then over here, it'll be on the next page showing as regular salary increase and insurance increase. Other than that, there are no other changes. Oh, it shows it here too. We forgot. He details the salaries on those 2 pages. But yeah, other than that, there are no other changes. Everything else is, yeah, those are the only changes we have. Yeah.
I have a question about the $4,000 that we see for the emergency social services fund. I know that Maplewood is only contributing 2,000, so why do we have 4,000?
Because we actually are going to expend $4,000, so we budget for 4,000. We showed the $2,000 as revenue from the emergency social services line item. So we showed $2,000 as revenue and $4,000 as.
You see me shake my, okay, look, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need you to say that another way, okay?
Okay.
You're speaking accountant speak.
I know,
Okay.
But accounting rules require that we budget for all of our planned expenses. So our planned expense is $4,000 in emergency social services.
And then they pay us back that grant.
They pay us back, they reimburse us $2,000.
We also pay them the salary.
We get reimbursed.
Correct.
We pay all of her expense,
So
we
she's our
reimburse
employee.
everything because she's our employee.
Okay.
They pay us. Sorry.
Okay.
I saw.
Thank you.
It's an art thing.
Yeah,
And I believe we bill them quarterly.
yes, we bill them quarterly.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Good, don't let.
Yes.
No, that's right, that's right.
Now, and I did forget, we do have a couple more, we have a couple more departments. We have fire and police.
Okay.
And I forgot about them. So they probably wouldn't be very happy that I forgot about them, but I did. So let me get to them real quick.
Just the presentation of it, you didn't read about them. in the
Yeah,
budget.
Right, exactly. I kept them in the
Yeah.
budget, so they should be happy there. So for fire, again, we have the cost of living increase as well as the insurance cost. Again, showing regular salaries and insurance costs going up. And then police is gonna be the very last one. So can I just page down? The page down? Do I have the page down? Oh, is that page down? There we go. Page. Here we go. Police. So in the police department, the other changes we had were again, salaries with the cost of living increase, as well as the pay parity. And then the insurance. And then again, the salaries change, the salaries and insurance changes, and then I think I might have one other change in here. There it is. So we did change this capital amount, we changed this capital amount, and the reason why is the patrol vehicle laptops and cradle points that they wanted for their vehicles, they only budgeted for half of them. Because they were dipping into their fund balance in a significant way. They have applied for a grant that they are very hopeful that they will receive to be able to pay for the other half because of the cost of the construction of the remodeling of the police station. It's just really dipping into the Prop P reserves. And so they only budgeted for half. They're fairly confident that they'll be able to get this other grant. So that way they can get the full set of the patrol vehicle laptops and cradle points that they were hoping to get. So that it was a change that we made at the very last minute.
So the budget turns things get all apart. Yeah, they are even be offset by a grant.
No,
Okay,
the budget shows that we're only getting half.
okay.
Because if we get the grant, we'll do an ordinance to accept the grant and add the expense. Because the grant will not be, in a lot of times, a lot of grants will not be awarded to you if you budget for them. So if you can afford to budget for them, then you can afford them, right? So that was one of the things that was kind of discussed and they really are concerned about their fund balance. So they were hoping that they feel confident, but you never know. So when that happens, if that happens, we will then do an ordinance to accept the grant money and appropriate the funds to be able to expend it. And that is the last of the changes, I promise.
Relatively. Thank you.
I tried.
No, it was-
That's.
Anything further, Ms. All right, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Good night.